Curriculum shapes what we learn, how we see the world, and whose knowledge gets prioritized. And like many other big social issues, it's an area where there's a lot of perspectives because it shapes the next generation and impacts our society at large. These perspectives vary widely. There are the folks who feel like curriculum is just facts. It's neutral. There are folks who feel like curriculum centers a dominant culture. There are folks who feel like, sure, curriculum has some biases, but people don't really get to choose the textbooks, so you kind of have to work with what you got. And then there are people who have never thought about it and might be unsure. At the core of all of these perspectives, there's a question about how culture does or does not show up in curricula. Welcome to Conversations That Shift the Ground, a video teaser for the full report. So before we jump into the report, let's talk about the study itself and the tool at the center of this work. In 2018, Black and Brown parent-led groups in New York City were leading advocacy work around culturally responsive and sustaining education. Culturally responsive sustaining education is grounded in a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity, such as race, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability, are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. These parent groups asked the Education Justice Research and Organizing Collaborative to create a tool to help them understand when curricula was culturally responsive or had opportunities for cultural responsiveness. NYU Metro Center's Education Justice Research and Organizing Collaborative brings together researchers, data and policy analysts, and community organizers to provide critical research, data, policy, and strategic support for the education justice movement, schools, and districts. That led to our research team using culturally responsive education literature to create a participatory and collaborative evaluation tool. That basically means that everyone's invited to the table to determine the quality of the curriculum when we're thinking about factors of culturally responsive education. So specifically allowing for students, parents, community members, teachers, admin to have input on what makes the curriculum culture responsive and to what extent they're satisfied with that. That led to the culture responsive English language arts curriculum scorecard and the culture responsive sustaining science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curricula scorecard. Each of these scorecards have three main sections: a representation section that looks at how characters and authors show up in the curricula, a social justice section which focuses on the power dynamics and the ways that culture is portrayed, and the third section, which is the teacher materials section, that really looks at how teachers are instructed or guided through navigating culture responsive instruction to use students' cultural assets within the curriculum and for learning. Many schools across the United States and globally use the scorecards in their school communities, and they shared a lot of informal feedback with us. They shared what they liked about the scorecards, what they didn't like about the scorecards, critiques, praises, what needed to be changed, what needed to be updated, and the overall experience of using the scorecard in their school communities. This informal feedback prompted the Education Justice Research and Organizing Collaborative research team to formally document and investigate the impact of using the scorecard in school communities. Specifically, we wanted to understand what outcomes are associated with using the culturally responsive education English language arts curriculum scorecard and/or the culturally responsive sustaining education science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curriculum scorecard. To answer this question, we invited scorecard users to participate in interviews and focus groups and to submit responses to a questionnaire so that we could better understand their experiences and the actions that they took as a result of using the scorecards in their school communities. There were three big findings from our study. Number one, that the scorecards prompted powerful conversations. The second finding was that the scorecard prompted the availability and use of culturally responsive curriculum. And the third finding is that using the scorecard changed the way that some school communities operated. But the finding that we're going to talk about today is the first one, because this was the most powerful finding. So many participants reported that using the scorecard led to powerful conversations that shifted the ground in really meaningful ways that allowed for conversations that previously were really difficult to have. So let's talk a little bit more about that. If you want to hear about the other findings, definitely read the report. Look for the link on this page. So what makes conversation so powerful using the curriculum scorecards? I'm going to share that with you. So one, it really did this in 3 ways. So one, it fostered a shared understanding and perspective of the curriculum. There were so many people who did not actually examine their own curriculum holistically. So taking a moment to reflect on what's actually in our curriculum and how does culture show up. So one, answering that question and having the curiosity to actually look at the curriculum as a collective, meaning with teachers, admins, students, community members, etc. Everyone was looking at the same curriculum at the same time and having a discussion about how culture does and does not show up. And that is not something that typically happens in many school communities at all. 2, building awareness and language to address inequities in curriculum. So being able to talk about what was missing and having language to describe what was missing and how participants knew it was missing was also a really important finding from the study around what made conversations powerful. And number 3, using the scorecards led to collaborative decision-making power about the curriculum because it was made across the entire community as opposed to by 1 or 2 gatekeepers or leaders who made that decision. So it involved multiple people's perspectives and opinions when considering how culture shows up. And the great thing about culture and culture responsiveness is everyone is an expert in their own culture because it's part of our lived experiences. So by inviting multiple people to the table to share those lived experiences and to share their perspectives on how culture shows up in the curriculum, it led to a really powerful moment for collaborative decision making about what it is and what it isn't. So let's get into some of the data by looking at the words of Charles, a superintendent who participated in the study. Charles said, "So the benefit of using the scorecard is it forced some really good conversations. We asked questions like, who is in this curriculum? Who are in these books? What do they look like? Who wrote the books? Those are the things our teachers had never really looked at before. When you start to look at who the authors are and then what those authors are bringing with them in terms of perspective and experience, that ended up being a great conversation. It's pretty powerful." Alvin, a professor who teaches student educators and used the scorecard in his class to help prepare educators, shared the following. "Something that I've been sort of struggling with recently is the portrayal of Black people. Black people are always represented by the struggle, the struggle, the struggle. Rarely, from my estimation, and even the students started to point out this year, where are all the examples of success for Black people? Where are the examples of the positive? It's always the struggle. The struggle, I get it because they need to know, but there's the question, where can Black people go? We do need some Black voices. We need some Hispanic voices." Really talking about the necessity of a balanced representation of culture. And finally, we'll talk about Hannah, a DEI professional who works with school districts, and she shared the following with us about her experience. Teachers reported that they were able to make decisions differently using the scorecard. It wasn't just the supervisor saying, "Oh, this text is a good text." We spoke about the curriculum, not looking at the person who's teaching it. So what do these data excerpts and the overarching finding about the power of conversation that comes from the scorecards have to do with the question we opened up with, which was, how does culture show up or not show up in curriculum? Well, it helps us to confront our assumptions about whether or not there's culture in curriculum or not. So we talked about people who think that curriculum is neutral or that there is no culture in curriculum. Using a scorecard can help actually to investigate if that's actually true. You can work with community members, parents, students, teachers, administrators, and the community at large to actually take a moment to look through the curriculum to discover the ways that culture shows up or doesn't show up at all. And that's determined by the full group together through a deliberative process and a participatory process guided by the scorecard. You can ask questions like, by the end of your use of the scorecard, you can ask questions like, is the curriculum actually neutral? Is the curriculum culturalist? Whose culture is showing up in the curriculum? Whose culture is not showing up in the curriculum? And how does that serve our students? our students specifically within our community, and more broadly within our society. If you want to dive deeper into culture responsive curriculum and using the scorecard in action, we actually released a report that looked at the top 3 English language arts curricula used in the United States, and you can see examples, visuals, images, and discussion around how a group of evaluators evaluated the curriculum using the scorecard and the justifications for why they gave those scores. So there's only so much that this video could cover, and there's so much more to explore when it comes to culturally responsive curriculum. We would love to know your thoughts and your experiences when it comes to either looking at culture responsive in curriculum or cultural responsiveness in curriculum, or if you've actually used the scorecard. Let us know what that process was like, and if you feel like your experiences mirror what was found in the report, or if they differed in other ways. Also, be on the lookout for other events, blogs, and videos that share more information on culture responsive curriculum and using the scorecards. Specifically, there will be a video that looks at how curriculum studies scholars have been looking at curriculum content over the last 100 years. So we're going to do a deep dive into that, because sometimes that context is important to understand how curriculum has changed over time and what's been included in it when we're thinking about culture specifically. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for your attention. And again, please go to the website and check out the report. Take care.